All right, we're going to continue on with our discussion of verbal communication. We just defined verbal communication as the use of symbols to convey meaning, symbols being language. And as we're trying to make meaning out of these symbols that we're sending and receiving, we're going to use multiple systems of meaning to help us do that sense making. The phonological system deals with sounds and the meanings of sounds. The syntactic system deals more at the level of the arrangement of words into recognizable and meaningful sentences. The semantic level is going to deal with the meanings and definitions of words and symbols. And the pragmatic, which I'll talk about in the next video, is going to deal with making meaning out of words, the verbal communication, by piecing together an understanding of our pragmatic and social contexts as we're communicating. So we'll talk about that one in the next video, but in this one, we're going to start with the first three. The first, phonology, as I said, deals with sound. Every language has a system of sounds. There's some words that are considered to be meaningful words, some words and sounds, and there are some sounds that are just considered to be noise, babble. And so phonology is going to take a look at that and study that. One of the terms from phonology that you're probably familiar with, one of its units, would be the unit of a word. A word is a single, distinct, but meaningful element of speech. So you have a whole stream of sounds. Which ones carry meaning, right? Which ones are distinctly symbolic? And we'll call those ones words. So we think of words as a single, distinct, meaningful unit of sound. You might not be familiar with this term, a morpheme. A morpheme goes even smaller, but we're still looking for meaningful sound units. And what I mean by that is they still convey some symbolic meaning, but we can break a word like unbreakable, we can break it up into smaller units that still have meaning, like unbreak and able, right? Notice the LE by itself wouldn't really carry much meaning, but able does, break and all act kind of like little mini words within a word. Those are morphemes. Even smaller is a phoneme. A phoneme is a perceptually distinct unit of sound in language, but it's perceptually distinct, right? I recognize that sound as one of my language's sounds, but it doesn't really carry any meaning, symbolic meaning. So the C sound, for example, in English, ka, the SH sound in English, sh, those are something that an English speaker would recognize as being part of the language. So phonology is going to look then at how do we make sense of the various sounds and what is the kind of system of each language when it comes to which sounds are meaningful and which sounds are not. Moving on to our next level, we are talking about syntax in grammar. And syntax is the order of words in a sentence in order to be able to create meaning in a language. And grammar is kind of the rules that govern the use of words. So syntax and grammar are rules that govern how words are used and ordered to make phrases and sentences that are meaningful. And a good illustration of how syntax and grammar, the rule-governed nature of language, doesn't only constrain our use of language, it actually allows us to be productive with language. So language is rule-governed, and that rule-governed nature allows us to be productive with it. We follow certain rules to be meaningful, but those rules allow us to recombine things and mix them around and produce meanings that had never been produced before. Like the fridge magnets here, a tube top humanoid, right? I kind of recombine these words. If I do it in a syntactically proper way and I follow a certain grammar structure, I can produce meanings that have never been produced before. I've never heard of a tube top humanoid, but I'm getting a picture of what that might be. So syntax and grammar kind of highlight how language is rule governed and productive. Here's an example of syntax in English. In English, we would tend to order a sentence in this order: subject, verb, object. And this is illustrated with the sentence I, subject, verb, hit. And what did I hit? The object, him. I hit him. And other languages change and recombine the order in which we would put certain kinds of words in a sentence. And in fact, even in English's history, we've used different syntactical order. Old English at one point used to be subject, object, verb, as illustrated in the sentence I, thee, wed, right? I marry would be how we say it. You, in Old English, I, you, marry. Okay. So syntax in grammar, while they're rules that we try to keep steady and keep from changing in order to have a game of language that we can agree upon, they do change over time. So they're dynamic, and that dynamism also adds to their productive nature. Moving on to our next level of meaning, and the last one I'm going to talk about in this video, it's starting to get complex here, is semantics. And semantics now deals with words, their meanings, and their definitions. It deals with how symbols gain meaning and how we come to understand the meaning of certain symbols. Symbols are references to objects and ideas. Earlier we talked about the symbol of water, right? And said that the water is a map or a reference for the term, the word water is a map or a reference for the object of water. So symbols reference objects in the world and ideas. And we have here what's called the semantic triangle that's going to illustrate the relationship between a symbol, the thing it's trying to stand in for or refer to, the referent, the thing there in the world, and then the thought that we actually have when we use that symbol. It's going to show us that when we use a symbol like dog, we're going to think certain things, right? You say dog, I think this, right? It's also going to show us that there is an indirect relationship between the symbol dog and the thing that's being referred to, right? There's no reason that sound dog has to stand in for that referent. So it's an abstraction, right? It's something standing in for something else, and it's going to be incomplete and abstract. It's not going to tell us a particular image. It's just dog in general. It's arbitrary. What do we mean? We could change it to something else. We could call it perro, right? Oh, I tried to roll my R's there. Perro. Dog in Spanish. Same referent, totally different sound. So there's an indirect relationship there. It's arbitrary. It could be anything. We choose to call it a dog because that's the convention. We've just agreed upon that amongst ourselves. So that's what I mean by there's an indirect relationship. And as a result, when I say dog, you're going to think one thing, and I'm going to think, allergies because I'm allergic to dogs, and you're gonna think of this lovable, fluffy thing over there, and we're gonna have a misunderstanding potentially when we're using these words. So what do? We, as Kenneth Burke reminds us, we try to create definitions for words. We try to kind of nail them down so that they are specific and as meaningful as possible, and we do better with some words than others, right? Some words have many, many different definitions. We can think of definitions too in two different ways. A denotative meaning would be like the dictionary definition, the conventional agreement of what this word means. And some words have many denotative, many agreed upon meanings. Some have very few agreed upon meanings. But in addition to the agreed upon meanings, there's also the connotative meanings that we have for words. And these are our own kind of personal definitions that we have for words that we base on, how we feel about a word, or our past experiences with that word. We might think of the word cheap, and we're going to have an emotional reaction to something that's cheap. I'm going to think that it's going to break easy, that it's going to be poorly made. If you use the term inexpensive, my connotative meaning might be, oh, I'm saving some money. It's not expensive. So this is something I can afford. And I might not be thinking so much about how it's cheaply made. Other words, like, say, the word American, even carry kind of cultural, mythic connotations along with it. If you're an American and you were raised American, you were told all kinds of patriotic stories. You sang songs, you saw symbols of eagles, and you have this kind of mythic understanding of what it means to be an American, and it conjures up all kinds of ideas in your head. Other people from other countries might not have that, right? They might think of the American as the annoying tourist who's loud and wants everybody to speak English. And so their kind of connotations for American would be much different and have a much different kind of cultural understanding than an American's would be. So the definition of words gets really complex when we start thinking about connotations. We try to be clear and put it in a dictionary and regulate it and make it try to sit still. But words, generally don't sit still. There is an ambiguous and dynamic nature to language here. Like the word mouse, I say it, what do I mean? Which one? It's ambiguous. It could be the one on the top, it could be the one on the bottom. And originally the word mouse meant the one on the top, but over time language grew and changed, and it also now means that thing there on the bottom. So language is dynamic. Some words and symbols have several meanings. We call those polysemic. And monosemic words, have one meaning. And those are usually technical words, really specialized words in science that we try to make them very nuanced and clear about this means this only one thing. There's some examples in the textbook. Read about it. There is semantic drift, so words change meaning, gain meanings over time, and linguists call this semantic drift. Here's an example of a word that's meaning has changed over time. Silly originally meant blessed, right? Something that was revered or sacred, as in the quote over here, Selly, or what we would call silly, art thou holy Virgin Mary. So you would call the Virgin Mary silly back in the day. But over time, that meaning shifted from being blessed to something that's deserving of compassion. And once it took on that meaning of deserving of compassion, we started to view, because we're often sympathetic to things that are weak, we started to use that term to mean weak, and eventually it morphs into something that's closer to today's meaning, simple and ignorant, somebody who's foolish or silly. So words change meaning, especially over time, and this highlights how language is both ambiguous and dynamic. Another aspect of language that highlights the ambiguous and dynamic nature is the use of neologisms. Neologisms, neo, new, logisms, word. Neologisms are new words, invented words. So words that did not exist before. Slang, similarly, are words that have been invented. They're often not formal. They're explicitly informal, and they're used almost like a secret code by the people who create and use it. And they come and go very quickly, but they're a significant part of our verbal communication. The textbook's section on these two concepts is actually pretty interesting. So check it out. We're going to talk about pragmatics in the next video.